Hey folks, it's Blamo. I'm your friend and host, Jeremy Kirkland. How you doing, everybody? Super special episode this week in partnership with Stone Island. Never ever thought I would ever say that phrase. So before we begin, I got to set the stage here because as you all know, or maybe you don't, this is something I've had the incredible honor of doing for a while, that being make this podcast, right? Like I started doing this pod as a way to process stuff and just talk to folks in the industry over 8 years ago, and never, ever in my wildest dreams did I imagine I'd get the opportunity to collaborate with, honestly, one of my favorite brands of all time, Stone Island. So this is cool for me, and hopefully it's cool for you too. My guest this week is Robert Triefus, CEO of Stone Island, and if the name rings a bell, but not all of them, it's because, well, you know, he always intended it to be that way, and which is something we get into on the pod, because you know what? We got into a bunch of stuff. And many people know him for how he helped turn Gucci into this absolute powerhouse. But he's been in the industry for a long time, beginning his career in 1986. Self-employed, by the way, for a bit. You know, shout out. But he worked at Calvin Klein, Giorgio Armani, among others. But look, we cover a little bit of that and we dive right into Stone Island. Robert and I discuss his career in the industry, the allure of the brand, the infamous badge, you know it, Oasis. Can't not talk about Oasis, the new Ghost collection, which I'm very, very excited about, and how Stone Island is evolving in today's landscape. Let's get into it. All right, folks, here we go. Where did you grow up initially? Because I think you have a pretty incredible career.
I grew up in the UK. I'm English. I grew up in London.
Yeah.
But I actually decided to go to a university outside of London. I wanted a different experience from my youth. And I ended up at Manchester University at a time that was very symbolic for the music industry. There was a club there called the Hacienda that opened while I was at university, and it became the first venue that Madonna performed at when she became Madonna. And so it was a very iconic club that resonated very much with British culture. And so you know, in my career, I've always been open to serendipity, and Stone Island, in a funny sort of way, closes a loop, because Stone Island, albeit an Italian brand that is now 42 years old, it is a brand that in English culture and British culture has a very strong resonance. And Manchester in particular is a locality that admires and has really embraced Stone Island. So the fact that I went to university in Manchester in the 80s and now I'm the CEO of Stone Island is, for me, great serendipity.
Yeah, I was going to say, because for me, I mean, I've always loved Stone Island, but I think it was, Stone Island was one of the first brands, it was a bit like Polo to me in the sense that you saw it everywhere, and that seeing it on other people, for me, was more of the advertisement than any sort of, explanation from the brand, right? Like I associated Stone Island with, I mean, it's funny we're talking about this because it looks like Oasis is about to reunite.
In fact,
with the Gallagher brothers.
Yeah, the internet has been hot today with that news.
Yeah.
And the good news is that Liam and Noel, as you know, are very much part of the Stone Island community. And consequently, for us, the news that they're coming back together is super exciting. We think that the Stone Island community will embrace that news passionately. And from what I understand, there are going to be some very exciting concerts lined up for next summer. You can be sure that between now and then, we'll be connecting with that exciting news.
Oh my gosh, it's going to be amazing. I'm very, very excited. But for you, so you go to school in Manchester.
Yep.
And then, you work your way into the fashion industry. But I think a lot of people know you from just basically reinvigorating Gucci. I mean, I'd love to touch on that a little bit, because when you first came to Gucci, it was not the more or less behemoth that it's become now. And I'm curious how you've walked the line in invigorating a brand without letting the brand lose its roots? What's your thought process and how you work with brands?
Yeah, I mean, look, in life, you never quite know which road is going to lead you in a certain direction. And interestingly, as I look back now at my career and I look at those opportunities, many of which have been serendipitous, they've all been about brands and about understanding the values and if you will, the kind of cultural essence of a brand. And global brands that really resonate with communities around the world. It's super important if you're trying to act as a custodian of a brand that has lived before you've arrived. It's super important to really understand what are those essential values that have allowed that brand to live as long as it has. And at Gucci, this is a fantastic Italian brand born in 1921 in Florence with, again, a founder who had very particular perspective on what he wanted to bring to his customers. And those values are and have been carried forward through the years. Now, obviously, contemporary culture and culture in general evolves over time, and a brand can easily get caught up in culture if it is a powerful brand, if it's an influential brand. And what is interesting about a brand like Gucci or Stone Island is that you can, as a brand, become adopted by communities. So the most authentic relationships that exist between brands and customers are those where the values are integral to the experience, if you will. And at Gucci, certainly, this is a brand that over time transcended different cultural moments and as a result became part of culture. And so, in the chapter that you refer to where Gucci expanded and grew exponentially, it was because there was a moment in time where its cultural relevance became extremely strong. And that was because there became in a way, a kind of homogenous group of fashion brands that became rather dull. And Gucci decided, under the creative directorship of Alessandro Michele, who was very instrumental in this chapter of exponential growth, it essentially broke the rules that were in place at that time. And it kind of stepped out of the box, pushed the envelope, and created cultural moments that people really engaged with. And that helped to stimulate this incredible momentum. And again, going back to what I was just saying that relates to Stone Island, it's very unusual that brands are adopted by communities. More often than not, brands try to assert themselves onto communities.
Exactly.
And, as going back to what I was saying, I grew up, I was at university in the 80s. I grew up in England at a time where Stone Island had a very strong connection with different communities, with the football community, with the music community, the grime community. And, I was part of that experience. I was a student. I wasn't looking at a brand in the way that I look at a brand today. I was participating and enjoying that. And so, what was interesting for me was that when I took on this role just over a year ago, I was able for the first time to really observe how Stone Island over 4 decades has connected with communities and has been adopted by different communities. And that is really down to also the way that the brand has been curated by its founders. This was a brand that originally was founded by a gentleman, Italian, out of Emilia-Romagna, which is the north of Italy. It's a part of Italy that is more known for industrial design, automotive design. It's the part of Italy where Ferrari was born, Maserati, Ducati, Lamborghini. So it's not from the same part of Italy that a lot of fashion brands were born. in the vision of Massimo Osti, who founded Stone Island. He was obsessed with material innovation. And what emerged over the years of its founding was that this was a brand that connected with people, both because of its really intense focus on product innovation, material innovation, using materials that had never really been used in apparel before. And then simultaneously, this adoption by different communities. So, we kind of paraphrase this history as lab and life. And lab obviously represents this obsession with material innovation, material research. And life, it is all that is represented by the different communities that have adopted this brand over time. And that is why I'm so excited about what Stone Island represents, because it's really very unusual that you have this unique combination of product and community that come together. And I think the testimony to kind of this unique chemistry is that when you look at the story of 40 years, we consider the kind of core part of our community, our family. We call it La Familia. And the part of the community that is the Familia is a part of the community that has studied the history of this brand intensely. They collect items from the 80s, from the 90s. And, these are individuals who, when they wear Stone Island, there is this kind of connection that is something that is very unique. And going back to what you were saying about the Gallagher brothers, two individuals who have very much appreciated what Stone Island represents, to the extent that there was one Glastonbury where I believe Liam's Stone Island jacket went missing, and it became headline news. So we're very respectful of the fact that this brand is embraced by community, and we want to always be sure that we remain authentic to the community.
Yeah, and I feel like too, especially coming from the US, which, you're very familiar with, a lot of CEOs kind of become celebrities in themselves. And I think, what's interesting, you've always been a little bit more behind the scenes and as a C-suite executive. And I'm curious, was that always a part of your career? And I say this because it's really important to let the brand speak for itself. But to be like what you were saying earlier, like as a custodian, you still need that gentle nudge, that gentle, evolution to maintain relevancy without, making yourself the brand. And I'm just curious, what part in your career did you start to realize that?
It's a very important observation that you're making that has driven my kind of general approach to the companies and the brands that I've worked with. I've been very fortunate because I've tended to have had an opportunity to work with founders. And founders, right the way back in the beginning of my career, I worked with a company called The Body Shop. And this was a brand that was founded, a skin and hair care company in the UK, founded by a very forward-thinking woman called Anita Roddick. And she, back in the 60s, she was to a degree an activist, and she brought that activism to the founding of this skin and hair care company. So it was based on natural ingredients, no animal testing, sustainability, way before others. When I moved into the fashion industry, I was fortunate to work with Mr. Calvin Klein and then Mr. Giorgio Armani. And because of that, I had a great respect for what I sensed were the values that the founders had, that they wanted to, if you will, instill in the brand that would live beyond them. And so the word custodian and that notion of, in a sense, being part of the story of a brand, and recognizing that you, in a way, are passing a torch from one period to the next period. That has always been very much front and center in my mind. And I think that if you have that front and center, then you realize that actually it can be smarter to be a little bit more behind the scenes, allowing the brand to speak for itself, but reinforcing all that that brand has stood for, and hopefully contemporizing what that brand has stood for, because clearly, time doesn't stand still. And it's extremely important that a brand can live through generations. And by the way, one of the things that I love passionately about Stone Island is I can go to one of our stores and I see generations in the same moment, because this is a brand that traverses generational eras. We have 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 50-year-olds, teenagers, all who enjoy being part of this community. That's really unusual. And I'm the father of two sons, and my two sons are both teenage. Well, one's a teenager still, one's a little older, and I would never impose upon them what they should wear or how they should think. The incredible thing about Stone Island is that I see frequently sons and fathers participating in Stone Island at the same time. And that to me is a great, in a way, vindication that this brand can traverse, time, geography, generation.
Yeah. Another thing too that I think is interesting is as, whatever we want to call fashion has evolved over the years. One of the things that I think is interesting is there's less of a focus on specific seasonal collections, because a lot of these collections, I'm kind of air quoting, really kind of blend in, which I would argue is good in the sense that it becomes a little bit easier to enter a brand. As a person who's coming from the outside, you don't want, because I remember when I first got some of like high fashion clothes and I was wearing it, and of course some other goofball was like, "Oh, that collection's 5 years old. Like that's not, But with Stone Island, in a good way, there's not really a specific date attached to some of these things. Like I have old, Stone Island with like the metal nylon, that's, I don't know, 10 years old now, and you can wear that next to something that just came out, and it still looks great. And so, I mean, coming from previous parts in your career where there was much more seasonal things, how have you, to lean on the custodian word again, how have you thought about that?
No, it's a really interesting point to your insight. I have been living in my previous eras with seasonality, and of course the fashion industry to a degree makes itself successful because of seasonality and because of trends. Mm-hmm. Stone Island, recognizes that there are different periods of the year when you need different weights, different fabrics, but it isn't a brand that is built around trends per se. It's a brand that is built around functionality, utilitarianism, and a great belief that item that you collect has to stand the test of time. It has to prove its worth in your wardrobe. And the great thing, to your point, is that you can. In fact, I met a client in Munich. I tell this story quite a lot because it's such a great story. I met a client in Munich a few months ago when we were opening our new store there. And he was in his 50s, and he told me he had 3,000 pieces of Stone Island in his wardrobe.
Wow.
I said, "You're an incredible collector." He said, No, that's my wardrobe. He said, "In the morning, I get up. Sometimes I'll pick an item from the 90s and mix it with something from the 80s, and so on and so forth." So, I do think in this world that we live in today, where unfortunately the topic of sustainability is something that is a reality. I mean, global warming is something that every single day we're recognizing is having a greater and greater impact. I think the notion of kind of longevity in product and ensuring that what you are making has true worth is increasingly important, especially to the generations that are coming after us, who unfortunately are having to face a reality that perhaps certainly in my teenage years I wasn't thinking about.
Yeah, but I think there's stuff to it too, in a lot of ways that, from an optimist perspective, like I still think things are better than ever. Yes, we have new challenges, but one of the things that does excite me a lot too, I mean, like we were talking about where clothes don't need to be, attached from a specific era to be worn. I mean, like you were saying, I have some old Stone Island that I'll wear all the time. But I think also pricing is something that I think is really interesting too, in how we view things that last. I've done, conferences and stuff about this, and I always reference Rolex pricing in the sense that, yes, it is a lot. And it is something that is probably not, it's a level of value and luxury, but it's not as much as they could charge. And I think coming from other parts in your careers where there were things from Gucci that were just, wildly expensive. And a lot of the stuff at Stone Island, yes, it is a premium price, but I would say it's not out of the reach of, say, other items in previous parts of your career. How much do you think about that in terms of value and pricing and luxury, in your day-to-day?
No, I mean, look, again, I said to you earlier on that I'm extremely thoughtful about this brand, its history, the community that has followed it over time. And in that context, it's extremely important that we provide value for what we're asking our customers to pay. And this is going again back to what you were saying earlier on. This is a brand that invests very significantly in research and development. Ultimately, what we want to ensure is that there is a fair price. What we're trying to do at this time is expand our offer, expand the range of the collection. We have 3 satellite collections that run alongside the main collection that each have a personality. One is called Ghost, one is called Marina, and the other one is called Stellina. And with each of these satellites, what we try to do is give a broader range of the offer and reach different parts of the community. So pricing today is a consideration that you cannot ever forget to think about, because there will always be that value consideration that a customer has. And if we succeed in building our community around this notion that the product has value and also authenticity and integrity, those are the key considerations for me. So again, going back to what I was saying, we're not per se a fashion brand. We're a brand that certainly plays to a degree with those who like to wear nice product, but we're also very much a functional brand that is about giving people what they need to live real lives.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, in the sense that I'm trying to remember who it was that said it, but it was about like buying less but buying better. And for me, like, I mean, I've collected Stone Island in various shapes and forms for eons. And a lot of times when I wanted a new piece, I was able to sell the stuff that I had for what I paid for it to get something else. And I think that was some of the stuff why I wanted to mention pricing, because, yes, there's a premium attached to things, but the fact that it holds its value is really important to me, especially in all the, products and brands that I patronize now, is to like, okay, cool. But I can wear this, I can live in it, and then in many cases I can, get a fair amount of what I paid for it back to continue reinvesting in the brand. And I think that's something that's pretty unique and not, unfortunately, not the norm with most brands, because a lot of those brands is like, well, we need to get you back into the next season. We need to keep that bill going. So I think that's really, great that you guys are aware of that.
No, it's true. And by the way, the other thing is, to a degree, Stone Island is like a great wine, because there are certain items in the collection that have materials that over time, the materials themselves evolve and, their colors change. They have a different patina. They have a different feel. Yeah. And so actually, as in the best kind of vintage spirit, there are items that come from the 80s, the 90s that have a very different texture and appeal. And that's to a degree also why their value appreciates over time.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Ghost collection because you had mentioned that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the Ghost collection is like, and correct me if I'm wrong, was like the kind of top tier premium. This is replacing my Loro Piana Icer. This is more of a less work weary sort of experience, and this kind of highest end luxury from a brand that's accessible in many spots. So I'm curious what your thought process has been in terms of kind of ushering in the Ghost collection stuff to different folks.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, going back to what I was saying, the idea of these satellites, Ghost is one of the three, is to reach a different audience, reach different segments. And in terms of the materials and the way that the Ghost capsule is brought to life, again, we never forget the DNA of Stone Island. So with a Ghost item, you will always feel that it is a Stone Island item. However, what we've been doing with Ghost is we've been introducing new materials, more sophisticated materials that I would say, speak to a more enriched experience, let's say. It is a collection that we first introduced in 2011, and it is symbolic because of its monochromatic badge. We're a brand that is obviously well known for our logo, which is a badge, that is a badge, by the way. And I often use an opportunity like this to remind everyone that our badge is attached to the item with 2 buttons, and the trademark of Stone Island is both the badge and the 2 buttons. So generally speaking, if you remove the badge from the sleeve, there will be 2 buttons within the jacket itself or the item itself where you can park the badge. And so this gives a great deal of versatility. Anyhow, in Ghost, it's a monochromatic badge. So the looks are monochromatic, subtle, and to a degree elevated within the offer.
It's funny you'd mentioned the badge. I mean, it's very difficult to talk about Stone Island and not acknowledge the infamous badge. And I'm curious, like, how, if there's certain pieces that you have where you might take the badge off or you leave it on. I say that because I remember, going in Milan and sitting outside this coffee shop, and this really beautiful, dapper, elegant gentleman was out there, and he had the quarter zip with like the thick knitwear on it. I think it was like just like your classic quarter zip Stone Island, and the Stony badge was removed. And I asked him, I was like, you ripped the badge off. And he was like, oh yeah. He's like, I keep it off on the top, but I leave it on the bottom, because he had the classic cargos, and that was on the bottom. But I think like that's so interesting and beautiful to me, because certain brands may be like, oh, how dare you? But like the fact that you're like, no, the logo is also those 2 buttons, because you could spot that it was a Stone Island piece from a mile away from just from his left arm, But yeah, I'm curious if you have stuff like that.
No, look, again, when I first took on this role just over a year ago, one of the things that I really wanted to understand is, there is this notion of getting the badge in. And I really wanted to understand a little bit more about the psychology of the badge itself. So we conducted some research in our community, and in a way, it was everything that I expected. This is a brand where the individuals, and by the way, the individuals can be male or female. We have a very strong representation of women in our community. Probably about 20% of our customers are women. And what we discovered is that the traits that both the men and the women who wear Stone Island, who are proud to wear Stone Island, associate themselves with are the same. It's self-confidence, self-assurance, exploration, all the values to a degree that Massimo Osti thought about when he baptized his brand Stone Island. This was a brand that was named by him after the novels of Joseph Conrad, the maritime novels of exploration and adventure. And so today, I think that, the fact that we are fortunate enough to have this compass. And a compass, if you think about what a compass symbolizes, it symbolizes that notion of adventure, of travel, of exploration. And so we wrote about a year ago now, we wrote a manifesto, which is called The Compass Inside. And so what this means is that those individuals who wear the badge or the two buttons, they are actually driven by a compass inside. And it's those values that they associate with when they're wearing a Stone Island badge. And we were very fortunate. We were able to get one of our community to narrate the manifesto, Dave, a super talented musician out of London. And that manifesto is now very much what has become a mantra. We follow the compass inside.
Yeah, I think that's great because so many brands, and I mean, I say this as a person who's worked on the business side of a brand and then also as a consumer side, don't always acknowledge the community and in some cases seek to reclaim whatever the community might have subverted or evolved on their own from the brand. But I think, Stone Island is probably the best example of a brand that has leveraged and leaned on it, but still, I mean, everybody knows about, Massimo Asli, so you get both of those worlds simultaneously, which I feel like isn't really the norm. And now when you look at like different case studies and business reviews, the importance of activating your community and making sure they feel involved, but still nurturing a community that you may not have reached yet is like the goal. And so it's a very, very, very difficult thing to do, which I give you a lot of credit for. And then obviously with, the brand before it's quite the task.
Well, just one observation on that, because America, I lived and worked in America for nearly a decade. And again, when I took on this role, I was intrigued about the Stone Island's history in America, because America was a market, a continent that the brand itself had not necessarily had an ambition to enter. But it happened very organically because, again, the hip hop community embraced Stone Island, and it started showing up in the music scene in America. And then Supreme approached Stone Island, and there was a collaboration that lasted for 6 or 7 years. And so in a way, Stone Island emerged into America in a very organic way through these community actions, if you will. And now, we don't have a huge footprint in America. We're in the main cities in New York, in LA, in Miami, in Chicago. But we think that it is a truly kind of exciting market for us for the future, because we've started to see the brand being embraced and adopted in other parts of culture. In sport in particular, we have a strong participation now in the NBA, in the NFL. And so it's kind of interesting to see how, as in the United Kingdom, as football embraced, or soccer, I should say, embraced the brand back in the 80s and the 90s. Now in America, we're seeing that in sport, but obviously in American sport.
Yeah, I think it's, interesting too, because you look at some of these luxury brands, which, I know we had discussed that, you're not a fashion brand, which I agree. But you see a lot of these brands that have specific ambassadors that lead, or they're hired, I don't know, Natalie Portman for this person or whatever. And with Stone Island, it's still in a way this kind of like blue collar-y sort of brand. I mean, the amount of times I've seen the photo of Steven Spielberg with his Stone Island sweater on, it's like you've had these sort of accidental ambassadors, because especially now we're in an era where time is not as much, time gets all flat circle, right? And so people are trying to look like a photo that's 30, 40 years ago. But I mean, you can still get that Stone Island sweater. You can still look like Spielberg, and I think that's something that, is really interesting to me, where you haven't gone and tried to hire some X person. It feels like when you get into the brand, it's much more of an organic, kind of if sort of vibe.
No, and I mean, you're touching on something now that has been a particular again thought process, because this was a brand that for 15 years developed a way of communicating, essentially an advertising campaign that used a very inclusive group of models, 9 iconic guys every 6 months. Very diverse. And again, a year ago, we thought about how can we carry this forward authentically, but at the same time, perhaps be more intentional about inviting the community to be part of it. And so at the beginning of this year, we transitioned from using the 9 models to members of our community. These are individuals who are already, I mean, the first and probably most symbolic image that appeared was of Jason Statham, who is, a very passionate Stone Island wearer. And he, in a way, expresses everything that you just summarized. We will, in about 10 days' time, introduce the next members of the community. And we will, for the very first time in Stone Island's history, have a female representative who is a member of our community. So it's an exciting moment. Where, again, truly authentic to the roots, we bring and invite members of the community who are Stone Island wearers to be part of the storytelling.
Yeah. Congrats on that. First off, I mean, I think also having someone in the female community and stuff in there is genius move. I'm also curious how much you view things like social media and different sort of like media trends. Like how much is your finger on that? Or do you feel like that's something that in some ways can be a bit distracting? I mean, you said you have two young boys yourself. Like, do you end up talking to them about brands and things like that they're interacting with? I'm just curious.
No, I mean, social media is clearly an incredibly kind of powerful part of our cultural existence today. It's kind of existential in a way. And as a brand, you can be extremely proactive, or you can be, I would say, again, a little bit more organic, a little bit more, I would say, passive in the way that you approach it. And I think that Stone Island, we want to, let's say, be part of a social media conversation, but never in an overly aggressive way. If we're part of the conversation, it is because it is organic and natural conversation, rather than us trying to engineer something. And I think that social media needs to be healthy. It needs to be something that is respectful. And so if you go on our Instagram feed, what we try to do is tell our story about product and about community, never trying to kind of overly excite. We just tell our story.
Yeah. And I think too, a friend of mine's is in the C-level of a very large fashion brand. And one of the things that was really important to him is, and I didn't even realize this, there are some brands that don't allow you to tag them, right? Because they don't want people trying to retell their story. And there are other brands that do. And a friend of mine who does it, he's like, oh yeah, because our best advertisements are the people that are wearing it in every, part of their life. Whether they're someone of a certain, demographic aspires to be toward, and maybe there's a different demographic of a person that aspires towards. And I think he's like, yeah, we just made it welcoming because all these people are wearing it anyway. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And he's like, yeah, and it doesn't come from them,
In regards to our social media feed, we feed content imagery that we make. We don't, as it were, repost the people who wear Stone Island. We allow them to, if they wish to, celebrate the fact that they're wearing Stone Island. That we allow, that's great. Because at the end of the day, it ultimately has to be just organic, and it has to be very natural. And that is the way this brand has always been. And we don't want to deviate from that.
Yeah, and I think that's a brilliant move. And I hope other people who are hearing that listen to this and realize that, where I think the longevity and love, at least from someone like me, who's had, various states of income over the years, it's still a part of my wardrobe, and I think it's because I've always felt included. And I think that's a testament to what you all have built and created. So, I mean, congrats on that.
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah. Before we wrap, I want to be conscious of your time. Is there anything you want to add or mention or lean on that I did not bring up?
No, I really appreciate the conversation that we've had, because I think you've been, first of all, you obviously have a great knowledge and understanding of the brand, which I appreciate. I think, I would just kind of reemphasize that there are very few brands today that have stood the test of time through what I consider to be a very low key approach to if you will, the promotion of the brand. I mean, this is a brand that has thrived on, in a way, word of mouth. I mean, this is a brand that has thrived on a community sharing experiences within a community, and has allowed this brand to tell its story through word of mouth. And that is something that we at Stone Island cherish, and we are very respectful of. And we just hope that in the coming years, as this brand reaches its potential, that we can continue to carry that legacy forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to, definitely compliment what is, I don't know if there's a correct term to use, but I think I don't know if it's like controlled success in the sense that, as I'm sure you've seen different, in your career, you've seen different brands like radically boom overnight. And sometimes, they end up turning off some of the original, patrons of the brand. And I think Stone Island is one of maybe just a small handful of brands that I feel have grown enough, but never too much, that the people that are purchasing it feel turned off. And I say this as a person who's like, look, this is how we're looking to express our identity, is through these clothing. It's a great way to feel, like you have your own little secret.
No. And, it's an important line to walk, to your point. And, of course, we have a community, which is our, employees, to look after and make sure that they themselves, as it were, benefit from the expression of this brand. But finding that line where we can bring forward the success and allow everyone, both externally and internally, to come with us, that's super important.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you so much for your time, and congrats again. It was a pleasure to meet you, and thank you again.
Likewise. Thanks so much. See you soon.
Thanks. Thanks so much for listening. The Stone Island Ghost Collection is out soon. For more information, visit stoneisland.com. But wait. Yours truly is hosting an event in New York City with Stone Island at Stone Island in Soho on September 9th. There's a link in the bio, and you'll see the invite on our socials. So just check out our Instagram. You can check out any of my socials. It's on there. I don't know how to speak an invite with the cool picture and the cool stuff, but check it out. If you're listening to this and it's after September 9th, oh man, my heart goes out to you. Hopefully there'll be more to come. Love you all. See you soon.